Hello, look at this wall. It is Cyclopean, as in built with irregular blocks of stones fitted together, and quite bulky ones at that. Pretty much spectacular work. However, what makes this one special is the reason why it was built for. That is apparently none whatsoever. For all we know, the wall here completed a flat platform that was built to have nothing on top, nada, with the lack of objectivity from the builders being one of the most puzzling aspects in Cyclopean construction, taking us to contemplate what is in nothing. Today's wall is located near the small Italian city of Sesi, bang in the middle of the boot. And on its own, it could be meaningless. The site does not have the fanciest ruin one can think of, and the location is so far from anything popular hardly anyone ever visits, leaving the platform even more empty now than the original builders had intended it to be, which is not easy, since the builders made nothing of it on purpose, leaving the top blank, just for us to imagine what was going on up there. Strange as it is, this one is not alone. Just around the city of Sesi, there are three equivalent platforms, plus one that is sort of an inception, with a platform on top of another platform. All were made with Cyclopean walls, and all were built for apparently no reason, with nothing on top. Furthermore, this is not even a local issue. All over the Cyclopean world, as in the places with Cyclopean walls, this apparent waste of stone masonry is quite common, with dozens of equivalent cases of custom-built pointless platforms, requiring us to take a distant look and wonder what is not there to be seen. Okay, in complete transparency, the pedestals in Sesi, just like most of the related platforms, do often have something on top, be it a church or a house, sometimes a Roman temple. However, those over-the-top constructions are from a much later period, built a long time after the original platforms, and in a different style of construction. So, being precise, the platforms have nothing on top from the same time and with equivalent stonework to the platforms themselves, which is weird. There are hundreds of similar structures, as in empty pedestals or pointless towers, made with interlocking stone blocks all over the Cyclopean shores. These are the lands with Cyclopean walls, or the places around the Mediterranean Sea, where people, for some unclear reason, decided to start building in this strange fashion, matching odd-shaped rocks and flattening the top of a bunch of hills, just to leave them empty. Take these examples. The talayots in the Balearic Islands. These are pointless cones of stones, built around the late Bronze Age, one for every village, just to stand there without any sign of what would be going on above them. Over to the other extreme of the Mediterranean Sea, in the middle of Turkey, built in the middle of the Bronze Age, in an area ruled by the Hittite Empire, there are also flat-top Cyclopean structures. In the south of Spain, once there were plenty of such topless bases, with a couple resisting, and called fig trees, for no better reason that they were left without anything on top, and the trees could grow. In Greece, there are also a few cases, but the emptiness was covered with fantasy tales invented by playwrights, even suggesting the platforms were a telecommunications system, despite it being an impossible proposal. Going further away to the Armenian plateau, again we find an empty flat top, built with excessively complicated stonework, dated from the Bronze Age, over 3,000 years ago. Or even across the ocean in Mexico, that I am not sure if it is related or not, but it is impressive either way, being a similar flat surface built with fitted stone blocks without mortar, and also during the second millennia BC, all the same as in Europe, but in the Americas. All these examples were not left empty all the time. Later people, often realized these platforms looked quite cool and decided to build stuff on top of them, as in Roman temples and Catholic churches, etc. What is not explainable is why not a single building of the same type of work as the base was ever found on top of such a Cyclopean platform, because Cyclopean builders could and sometimes did some marvelous buildings with Cyclopean stonework. Take this example in Sicily, and likewise there are others scattered around. If the builders could and would make fine structures of the Cyclopean type, why never ever one of those Cyclopean buildings is to be found on top of an empty Cyclopean platform? Or also, why were the platforms built and left empty just to be used by later incoming people? Or why did the builders go to such extensive work just to leave a smooth surface on top of a hill? Or even what was going on top of the empty platforms when they were first built? Well, the gods above would know why. We don't. And just to be clear, I'm not saying these were landing pads for alien ships, but also there is no more exciting alternative explanation. Although the vast majority of the empty Cyclopean platforms are quite unknown, some of them got to be so famous they end up defining the whole concept. That is the case of the Acropolis in Athens, which has become the poster child for both later occupation and ritual usage, despite being just one of the many topless platforms the Cyclopean builders did and left nothing on top. So famous is the Acropolis in Athens as the home of the Parthenon and Nike that you'd be excused not to know it all started to be yet another empty Cyclopean platform, built to level up a hill and have nothing on top, nor clear usage instructions. In fact, all we see today are later adaptations made by new inhabitants to store gunpowder or robbed statues or flocks of tourists, a bunch of new usages that did not turn out so well when compared with the original empty plan. In the beginning, that is, at least before 1500s BC, 1,000 years earlier than the classical Greek temples, this dry, useless rock outcrop was transformed into a Cyclopean empty platform by some unknown peoples called the Pelasgian. What they had in mind for the awesome work, no one knows, because they did not care to leave us any other sign of their plans, except for some odd-shaped stones fitted against the rocky background to create a uniform and empty platform set in a place of absolutely no practical value. The Athenian Acropolis has no water, no control over the territory, no access to the sea. It had to be extra protected with extensive walls outside the city. Nevertheless, the site is visually striking, and just for that, for being beautiful, it prospered. Later people, like us, were so mesmerized by the flat empty top they decided it must have some direct connection to the divine, and followed up accordingly. The classical Greeks called it a temenos, a sacred area, the Holy of Holies, and filled the hole in it, the empty space, with a bunch of temples. Later on, the platform had to be reinforced to secure the buildings, making it unrecognizable, although still quite impressive. Whilst academics today decided to ignore the motivations of the original builders and just affirm the whole thing was purely ritualistic, as in that the platform existed just to hold temples, even if the actual temples were built a millennia later. Saying something is purely ritualistic is sort of an offensive slur used by bureaucrats, when in fact all rituals, even when derived out of pure superstition, always have a concrete objective. Take, for example, eating pork. Some religions consider it to be a health risk and disavow the animal. You know who they are. Others worship the flesh by eating charcuterie worthy of the gods, as seen in the Cyclopean lands of Lusitania. Either way, both rituals, yea or nay for pork, have a practical goal, and likewise all actions done with a purpose can be called ritualistic, since results are never guaranteed, and faith is needed before doing whatever. Moving on, stating something is ritualistic is incomplete without including what ritual was performed and what result was expected. So, to accept the Cyclopean empty platforms were ritualistic, we also have to wonder what sort of magic the builders were expecting. Could they be attracting alien ships? Of course not. This recurring mania of building a large platform made with huge blocks of stone and then leaving it empty as a ritual, hoping something like a temple or a church lands on top of it a few centuries later, seems a waste of perfectly good stonework. However, it is worth to consider the other go to alternative explanation for ancient works: defensive. The military usage of the pedestals would be a spectacular failure for these reasons. First and foremost, it is a total waste of very slow and expensive stonework. Military men are said to be always fighting the past war, and since the platforms often took generations to complete, they would not be ready in time for any such war. Also, these things don't look at all like castles. They miss the battlements and the protective curtain to hide behind. A soldier on top of such a platform is way more exposed than protected. Then some platforms are located in places with low visibility, in the middle of valleys, away from any strategic points, such as a river or a mountain pass. Just remember how Sesi is in a secondary city, yet it got three of those platforms. Others are so small, so without water or shadow, too easy to go around, too easy to encircle, making them, in case of conflict, a sure death trap. And more importantly, and likely our main clue, the platforms are not discreet at all. They are exposed, striking, and visible, showing off rather than shunning away in military camouflage. They are there to be seen, to attract. What? I don't know. But again, it is not aliens. The original age of the platforms is disputed. By me. In Italy, all the Cyclopean walls, at least in the mainland, are dated as barely pre-Roman or from the 400s BC, because that is the time when the Romans started imposing themselves around the hood. leaving us with the first writings and datable evidence, because no one before the Romans was taking notes. This Roman journaling, akin to angst teenagers, is more than enough to prove something is pre Roman, with the Romans usually saying as much themselves, writing how most of the platforms existed beforehand. However, some lazy academics argue that if something is pre Roman, as in the platforms clearly are, they will have to be so by merely a couple of weeks, and not a single day more, thus establishing the 400s BC as the limit for dating, or as I like to call it, DiCaprio dating, always selecting the youngest possible dates in a way that is legal but still creepy. Luckily, not all academics are copiers. Some do actual research, and one of them visited the platforms in Lazio, in the south of Rome, where there were dozens of them, all barely visible today, and found out most of the buildings are much older than said, being from at least before 800 BC, that is 4 centuries before the Romans' expansion, raising the question of why these findings were not expanded to all of Italy and to all the other equivalent platforms. As in, if 7 or 9 platforms have been securely dated to be older than 800 BC, what excuse is used to keep dating other very similar works to the 400s BC? Yep, silence. Listen to the crickets on the empty platforms. Confused yet? That is the question. To be or not to be Cyclopean. Hamlet and Shakespeare made a drama out of this simple doubt, because for them to be or to be are one and the same. Whilst south of parallel 44, as in the line separating the lands in Europe with Cyclopean empty platforms from those without, to be and to be is not one question alone, but two different verbs. One verb expressing a short term situation, and another describing a long term identity. Portuguese, Italian, Basque, and other tongues in Cyclopean lands have this clear distinction of two verbs. One is estar, for being in one place, in a temporary situation, and another is ser, for being one thing, permanently with character. That is where the pedestals come in. I know this is extra confusing in English for non Cyclopean speakers, but try to follow this idea. The platforms existed for being in the sense of ser, identity and character, and not in the sense of estar, as staying on top of one for a practical ritual. The platforms were left empty because they expressed something permanent and immaterial. They were a space to feel tall and proud. That is why the builders took all that trouble in building them, and also why they left them empty, as nothing else could express the essence they were showing off, their culture. A culture is a set of common practices and beliefs that are shared by and unite a group of people. They give meaning, identity to a collective. And those traits only make sense when shared with other people, as in their language or their religion, and also their architecture. A culture is cooperative, a communion of ideas. A culture is in the sense of existential being, ser. On the other hand, meaningless pottery or underwear are volatile, circumstantial. They are defining at much fashion and mostly individualism. Things made and used by one person in a moment, as in estar. Again, the difference between being on top of a place for a moment or being part of the space itself is confusing. Still, it is these little big differences that make up a culture, and the Cyclopean builders were not a sequence of temporary coincidences. They existed as a lost culture expressed in the void of their flat tops. Here's the thing, the Cyclopean builders were a culture, a group of people that at a point in time shared a common sense of being and a set of preferences that made them distinct from everyone else and also united them around building something special, even if left empty. That immaterial connection they shared is the definition of a culture and was what they placed on top of their empty platforms, flat tops built on purpose to represent a culture, or if you still are not convinced, landing pads for aliens. Either way, the people building the platforms are now gone. More than that, their culture or civilization is now lost. And so often that happens to the best of them, as we'll see next. That's it for today. Hope you liked it. Drop an eye in the comments.